What's up, horror fans? It's Danny from the Lassercast, and I gotta admit, I feel like I'm the only one watching The Baby on HBO Max. If you're watching this show, let me know in the comments. Tell me what you think of it, because 4 episodes in, I'm totally digging this show. I find it funny, I find it genuinely creepy, and tonight had some of my favorite last night's episode had some of my favorite images, just the way that the camera lingers on certain shots. Really loved it. I'm a huge fan of this show, if you couldn't tell. This episode 4, is called The Mother. It's directed by Faraz Shariat and written by Susan Sunhi Stanton. And the baby disappeared at the end of episode 3. And we find out right away that Bobbi, Natasha's sister, has taken the baby and is on the way to visit their mother, Barbara, who lives at this very strange commune out in the middle of the woods. Bobbi is played by Amber Grappy, and she is a really fun character. We met her last episode. Her and her partner were trying to adopt a baby, and at that exact moment, her sister walks back into her life. Natasha, played by Michelle de Swarte, who I watched interviews on YouTube with her. I've been calling her Michelle de Swarte. Apparently it's Michelle de Swarte. I apologize to her. I love her on this show. She walks back into Bobbi's life, and she has a little baby out of nowhere. They go to visit their mother, played by Sinead Cusack, who I believe was in V for Vendetta years ago, one of my all-time favorite movies. And she's like the head of this commune. And whenever you put things like a commune and a feast and a bonfire in a horror show, or a show that has horror themes, I instantly go to folk horror. And this show went deep into folk horror in this episode, which is possibly why I love this episode so much. One of my all-time favorite films is the original 1973's The Wicker Man, directed by Robin Hardy, starring Christopher Lee. There's a great horror film by Ben Wheatley called The Kill List, and there are shots in this that reminded me of The Kill List. There's shots in here that reminded me of Robert Eggers' The Witch and Ari Aster's Midsummer. You get that total folk horror vibe where, you're in this like wooden cabin with these clay creations, clay figures, and then you go out and the screen is totally, you're in this field and it's totally dark except for the roaring fire. There's this amazing image at the end where Mrs. Eves walks towards Natasha holding the baby, and they're framed by the fire. The director of photography for this episode was Ben Wheeler. I made sure to write the name down because I noticed the way that certain shots in this episode were done. Absolutely loved it. Basically this episode is about Natasha being forced, just like last week, she's forced to reunite with her sister, who she hasn't seen in years. And now in this episode, she's forced to reunite with her mother, who she hasn't seen in 15 years. This commune, there's just something about, communes. It gives off a culty vibe, and there's a lot of creepiness that goes on. Plus, you get to see a little bit of the baby and what the baby does to Mrs. Eves and to Natasha. The way that the camera makes you feel like there's something going on. There's this otherworldly presence that the baby's causing. At one point, Bobbi starts choking on a chocolate chip cookie, and the baby's looking at her and giving like a look, and the camera kind of weaves in and out. And it's just really cool things that make the show feel even creepier. Then there's an amazing scene at the end of the episode. Natasha has finally fallen asleep, And Bobbi comes in, she sneaks in, and Bobbi has a way with the baby. Bobbi's the only one that can make the baby fall asleep. Once the baby falls asleep, though, Mrs. Eves, played by Amira Ghazala, she sneaks in and she comes at the baby with the pillow, and she goes to suffocate the baby. But as she's suffocating the baby, as she's smothering this infant, Natasha, laying in bed, starts gasping for air. And 4 episodes in, there is now seemingly this magical, otherworldly connection between the baby and Natasha, where you go to smother the baby, Natasha gets smothered as well. And I feel like that's got to be a metaphor for, motherhood can be smothering, and also that, like, the baby is part of you, and if something happens to your child, you feel it as well. So I just love the way that they built that connection. At the feast, Barbara, Natasha and Bobbi's mother, has this quote that I wrote down: "To the mothers and the children that make them." And I think it's interesting. We always think about it as the mothers, biologically, mothers are the ones that make the babies, but it's the children that make the mother. I like the inversion of that, and how, again, there was a behind the scenes feature for episode 3 that talked about how there's all these different aspects of motherhood, how there's non-traditional parenting. And, in full disclosure, I married my wife, and my wife had a 4-year-old son at the time, and I've been with, he just turned 18. So I've been a part of his life for 14 years. Very quickly into our marriage, I stopped referring to him as my stepson, and I just started referring to him as my son. And in many ways, I identify with that quote, to, obviously not to the mothers, but to the parents and the children that make them. To me, Charlotte is my biological daughter, and I love her to death, and we do videos here all the time. But I learned how to be a parent. I learned how to be a father. Not biologically. I didn't help make the child, but the child helped make me. So that quote really identified with me, and it totally seems to be identifying with Natasha, because Mrs. Eves goes to smother the baby, and she herself gets smothered. And the episode ends in this really haunting scene where Mrs. Eves picks the baby up and walks her towards the bonfire, towards Natasha, and Natasha's cursing at her, and the whole time Mrs. Eves is railing off a list of names, and we see through, like, quick cut flashbacks. These are the women who have been with this baby, the mothers, the previous mothers, who have all met their death because of this baby. We only watched the mom in the first episode fall off the cliff, and we watched the other woman choke to death, or on the cookie in the little store. So we didn't realize the scope. And nothing against this episode, because it was great, but my favorite part here is the preview on HBO Max for next week's episode, because it appears to be a flashback to Mrs. Eves as a younger woman who appears to be in a relationship with this woman named Helen, and then the men in Helen's life come for her. What it appears to me is that Helen was either married or in a relationship with a man, and she left the man to be with Mrs. Eves, and they had a relationship together, and then Helen is stripped from that. She's like ripped away from Mrs. Eves and brought back to the old traditional life. And I'm really interested to see where this goes, and it makes me feel like, one of the main questions of this episode from Natasha especially was, who exactly is Mrs. Eves? We don't really know. She's just this kind of present figure in the series so far. And so I think we're going to get to the root of that next week, and I really can't wait for that because, like I said at the beginning, I have been loving this show. I've reviewed this show, all 4 episodes so far. I feel like I might be the only one. Pete and I went through this when we were on Comic Books Transformed and on the Comic Books Transformed channel, and we were talking about Raised by Wolves, another HBO Max show. It felt like we were the only people talking about that. Now, we did some live discussions and we heard from some fans. So if you're out there, if you are a fan of The Baby on HBO Max, like this video, subscribe to our channel, hit me up in the comments, talk about The Baby, and, we'll see where we go because really loving this show so far. The Baby premieres Sunday nights on HBO Max. Monday, you can come to the Lacercast to hear me talk about it and give you my thoughts and feelings. Every week, I feel like I've liked the new episode a little bit better than the last one, so really excited for next week. If you're on the Lacercast, you can check out, I did a recap video of the Fangoria Chainsaw Awards. You could watch the entire only 83-minute award show. Isn't that nice? 83-minute award show. That's less than the length of a movie and certainly less than the 3+ hours that the Oscars slogs on for. That is on Shudder right now. Charlotte and I, Friday was Friday the 13th. Charlotte and I did our franchise ranking of the Friday the 13th series. She ranked her top 11 Friday the 13th films because she hasn't seen the remake yet. I did all 12. We have plenty of cool stuff to check out on the channel. I mentioned that, one of the winners at the Fangoria Chainsaw Awards was Stephen Kostansky for Psycho Gorman. Pete and I have a really cool interview with him up on the channel. If you search our channel, you'll find that we had a really cool talk with him a few months back. So yeah, that's been my review of The Baby Episode 4, The Mother. And if you like this show, hit me up, and we will see you next week.